Just to clarify, my specialism is ADHD. I do a lot with behaviour management generally, and the reason it seems to fit so well is because my life as a teacher, what I noticed is if I applied some strategies behaviourally that work for a young person with ADHD, none of my other students were disadvantaged by that, and I found it much easier just to apply one approach which was fair, consistent, lots of routines, and we had really good results at the end of that. So I now work full time doing these sorts of talks, but particularly about positive behaviour management. So I'm a teacher, but I'm also a parent. I've got 4 children, 21, 20 and 2 18-year-olds, and one of them has ODD. He hasn't got an ADHD co-diagnosis, but some of his behaviours are quite similar. But I was a teacher before I was a parent, and actually some of the things I knew as a teacher apply quite well at home. So that's what I would like to share with you. Some of the things that I know work quite well, they might work for you. You just need to have a whole toolkit of things you can try. That's my feeling. You know, one thing won't work, but another thing might, so you just have to keep trying. So the session today, I want to look with you at the causes and triggers. What is it that drives this behaviour? And there are a number of things, and it's not always the ADHD, to be fair, but we'll look at that. We'll look at some techniques to do with oppositional behaviour. So if you get refusal, defiance, no I won't, you can't make me, you might have heard those expressions over your life, yeah? And some of that is teenage behaviour, some of that is the ADHD or ODD. We're going to give you lots of ideas so that you can then choose a strategy that might work for you. And if you can go away from here with 2 or 3 things that you're going to try, then that will have been a good morning's work, in my opinion. We will talk about teenagers. I quite like teenagers, you know. I couldn't eat a whole one, but I quite like them. And because the age group I've always taught is 14 to 19, so I've kind of knew a lot about them before I went to work in schools with younger pupils. But actually, I think before we get going, there's something we just need to talk about. And that is about whose behaviour we can control. So whose behaviour can we control? Our own. There's only one person's behaviour you can control. So never think for a moment that anything you're going to do is going to be the controlling factor. It won't. You have to be persuasive. In some cases, you have to be manipulative. And in a lot of cases, you just have to provide choices of how the behaviour should go. And if you think about it in that way, rather than thinking I've got to control this, what comes from the inside will sound a lot better, because you're not trying to force someone to do something, you're trying to manipulate and persuade, and that's a bit different, I think you'll find. So remember that, in that moment, it's only me that I can control. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard about the Iceberg theory of behaviour. I'm sure you've all educated yourself on behaviour over the years, but what we know about an iceberg is that the biggest part of it is invisible. And what we know about behaviour is that all behaviour is driven by something. It doesn't just happen. No one's born with behaviour. Things happen to change the behaviour, or to change the reason for the behaviour. We're all different. We've all got our own icebergs. Mine used to be homework time. That was the trigger for me, always. Get out of school, all the wheels would fall off. You know how it is. But there's lots of reasons for the driving of the behaviour, and here's some of them. It's invisible. It's the bit you can't see. But some of these drivers are here, and for a young person with ADHD, it could be any one of their mental and physical symptoms that's driving the behaviour that you can see. The bit you can see is the bit you need to deal with. But what you can't see, you almost need to preempt it. You need to understand. I can't see it, but I know what it is, or I can guess what it is. Or I'll have a bash at guessing what it is. Now, in education terms, this is a 2004 piece of work which was in a behaviour management training session. It was in a manual almost, one tiny unit, because you don't do behaviour management very well in teacher training, unfortunately. And this was presented as the top 9 long-term causes of poor behaviour. I hate the word poor, but that's how they described it. And you can see these are just the top 9, and you can see that ADHD fits into that. There are a number of other factors, but these are long term. So that is going on outside school, in our world, in home life. But during every single day, there will be a number of triggers. This could happen at any time, and these are the top 9. So we've got boredom, lack of skills to do something, perception of injustice. Have you ever met anyone with the perception of injustice in your house? I don't know. Not being listened to, we all feel that. That's a driver, isn't it? Failure to understand an instruction. I'm going to demonstrate how difficult that can be a bit later. Having personal possessions taken. Now, what do we tend to do when we're trying to impose sanctions on our kids? We take something that they really like, and that actually can be a trigger for a further behaviour episode, and you kind of get onto a conflict cycle then. So you have to understand what's driving that. Being shouted at, well, tiredness and being bullied. Now there's loads of examples in everyday life that you can throw these at. When you understand that these are the top 9 that have been identified, boredom particularly, then you kind of think, well, can we preempt those? This is going to be the situation. Can we preempt that trigger? It's going to be a trigger, so what are we going to do to stop it from happening? And sometimes you can plan ahead that way when you get to understand the patterns of behaviour that you see. So remember, this will be available for you to read back later when Alistair's uploaded it. So this is what's going on under the waterline on the iceberg. Remember that. So that's part of it. The other thing is how we speak. And I saw this, social media is brilliant for these sorts of things. I saw this recently. And it says it's one of the most powerful images ever seen. Study it and clean up your act for the sake of your children. So this is what we say. And some examples here. Brat, this is your own fault. I don't have time for this. Let it go. I don't know. There's lots of things in there that we say in a moment of heated irritation, passion, anger. And we don't mean it, but it just comes out because we're infuriated. I've got a friend of mine's got a daughter who's becoming a teacher, and she did an assembly, and I went along to watch her, and it was about bullying, and she took with her a tube of toothpaste, and she squeezed half the tube out onto a plate, and she said, right, that's harshful words, that's harmful, upsetting, bullying words, they're all out on that dish now. How am I going to get that back into this tube of toothpaste? And of course you can't. Once it's out there, it's out there. And people remember, you might clean it up, but it goes in. So sometimes our language can be the thing that sets off another trigger for another behaviour episode. Or it gets internalised and we start to feel, well, you start to see this very low self-esteem. It's my fault. What am I doing wrong? I can't help it. I've upset everybody. And again, that can lead to further outbursts later because of this feeling of low self-worth. It sounds awful. And I'm dramatising it, but it does happen a lot. And this happens in class too, and friendship groups. And so it's not parents, it's just life, really. I've written one down here, which my own children say often to each other. You're so annoying, right? And you've ruined everything again. So when we go on a holiday or a trip out, and someone's fed up and anxious, we're in the car, like that one, don't, and you're in the pictures or wherever it might be. Over the years you hear these things being said often, and it's come from a person who's just cross and upset, but the person who's on the receiving end just builds that up and they start to lose their own self-worth. So if you can think of things in your own home that you hear often, try and flip it. Anyone here on Twitter, by the way? Not many of you. God, that is interesting, because it's the best place ever for information. just a tip. I follow somebody called Emma Sutton, and I've never met her, but she's just adopted, or a couple of years ago adopted 2 children, and they have a load of different special educational needs. They have attachment issues, they have ADHD, they have lots of different behavioural problems. And it's marvellous to watch her. She's growing in confidence, but also changing the way she approaches everything. And she did this poster recently, and she said it was okay to share it. It's called PACE, P-A-C-E. Now, I recommend that you look it up. And what part of it for her was she decided she'd try and work her own world through these initials. So it's playful, acceptance, curiosity and empathy. And amongst all of that, she's done some absolutely marvellous little drawings that represent the scenarios she's faced and what she's doing about it. So there was here playful, oops, I got that wrong, sorry, can I join in when the kids are playing and things like that, can I join in? Because we tend to be too busy to do that, and sometimes the very thing your child wants is for you to just spend 10 minutes joining in with them. Let's skip and dance and go crazy. Well, if you like that kind of thing. But it's about making connections. This is acceptance of behaviour. You're okay, but that behaviour is not. I can see why you might think that. So that's her comments that she's going to be using. I can see why you might think that. So, you hate me, I'm awful, la 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 la. I can see why you might think that. Should we talk about why? And along here, judgments, yeah, so we do judge, don't we? Curiosity, tell me about that. Why do you think that? Why do you feel that? Lots of really good things here. And up here, this is, what's this one? Empathy. It must be hard. I can understand how upset you are. One of the things I've noticed as a teacher, but also as a parent, is that when my youngsters have withdrawn from a conversation with me, so in class it might be head on the table, which is not very polite really, but you know, if I was a different person I might go, wake up, and give them a poke in the ribs, but I'm not that person. I would go along and say to them, I can see you're having a bad day, I'll come back in 5 minutes and we'll get you started. So I've shown them some empathy. I haven't said, how dare you come in with your hood up and just sit there. And I do the same at home. So if my lot are a bit moody, stomping about, which is every day, then one of us will say, is everything okay? Do you want to go and have a chat? 5 minutes, go and have a cup of tea, you know, whatever. Give them some take-up time to make that choice. Do we want to talk to you? And I think this is what this is describing. So I highly recommend that you look at PACE and see what you could get involved with. And her blog is nibblesandbubbles.co.uk. She writes about her experiences with their behaviour. So if you like to check in on what others are doing and have a go, then have a look. But as I say, I was very impressed with this because it did sort of represent a lot of areas that we could up our game a bit. Emma Sutton is her name. Emma Sutton. So going back to language then, here's another thing I think we could try to flip things. We're always saying, don't do this, don't do that, stop, no, don't this, don't that, don't do that. So don't do that. What are you, what's the routine around that? Don't do that. If someone's doing something they didn't ought to be, and you say don't do that, you're not planting a positive instruction. So what could they be doing? So say they're playing with their knives and forks. What would you say in response to that? What do you want them to do with it? Yeah. Put your knives and forks down.
But you want to use them.
And be specific where? On the table, either side of your mat, whatever the thing is, be specific until you want to use them, exactly. And then you say, thank you. You assume it's going to happen. You know, these, I know, dig deep people, dig deep. This is a strategy. So instead of saying don't do that, say be specific about what you would like the child to be doing at that moment. And I recommend saying thank you. Take the please away from the beginning. Don't say please at the beginning. Say thank you at the end. Please will you kind of implies a choice. And to be more subtle and persuasive, say I need you to, and then say thank you at the end. But to say don't do that, that's not giving an instruction. It's not being clear about what you're after. What have we got now? Don't argue. What is it we want with this? What's the opposite of don't argue?
Please talk nicely with each other.
Okay. Any others? Do as you're told. Yeah, that one works. The thing is, I actually saw this wonderful piece and it said, I'm not arguing with you, I'm explaining why I'm right. And I think, well, that's a good one. But the other thing is you could say, you know, you have a different opinion to me, or I can understand why you think that. But I don't think that, so we don't need to argue, we just have a different opinion. And when you can say those words, rather than just don't do this, don't do that, then that will be helpful. Don't say that. Now I can't imagine for a moment what they might have said, but what would your counter to that be? I think you've said it already, speak nicely. With older ones, with teenager language, which I have to say, you have to be ever so brave about that, because in their mixed groups, my experience is it just tumbles out, all these words. You think, well, where did you hear that? Because you haven't heard it in my house. And it becomes a language all of its own. And so sometimes when you're thinking, oh, they've got to get them ready for work, for professional environments, we always say use professional language. I mean, that's quite nice. With younger ones, you need to say, what's a better word than that? Choose a different word. The only way you can modify behaviour is to replace it with something else. So if your word, we do this in maths actually, I have the motor vehicle guys, they're doing their motor vehicle training and I teach them maths, and they come to me and it's like, oh, it's terrible. I don't like that word, I don't like that word. Okay, let's put the word of the day on the board, and so we will have the expletive of the day. So it might be, yeah, we do, it's what we call it. It might be courser, it might be camshaft, whatever to do with their piece. But you could do that at home. You could change the word. If they're learning words that you don't want them to, then you give them a word that they could use when they're feeling a bit of a oh bother sort of moment. Try it, you never know, might work. Don't lie. What do we want? Yeah. Did that really happen, I say? Really? What, and then that happened? Well, it wasn't quite like that. That happened. Okay, so that happened. And you have to give that impression that actually I know that it's a load of nonsense what you're saying to me. But anyway, I think if we say what we want, we're more likely to get what we want and get the behaviour that we're looking for, and be specific. Being specific is much more important than having a negative, because if you aren't specific, then things could still go wrong. So, and the most important thing is avoid long-winded explanations about what's right and wrong. At that moment, just say what you want. And when you're in a casual kind of chatty moment, then you can talk about this is not good, this is good. But at that moment, just try to avoid all of that. So things that help with behaviour are the routines. There's clear evidence that suggests somebody who has ADHD will definitely work much better with really firm boundaries. Now the problem with life is that we say, well today we won't worry about that today. You can get up later today, or you can have your phone for a bit longer today, or you can have more laptop time today. We break our own routines. And what happens with that is that you get a lower adherence spectrum. So next time someone's on the laptop, they'll say, well, last time you told me I could have it for another half an hour. So you've broken it yourself, and you need to rein that in as far as possible and make that extra time into almost like a reward. It's not a norm, it's something that someone can earn or gain from good routines, following good routines, taking good instructions. I quite like these. Those are these little cartoons around and about. But that just about sums it up, doesn't it? We're all a bit like that. And you go on holiday and you think, oh, I've got to get up today. Oh, I haven't got to have dinner at 7. So keeping routines is very key for your behaviour management. Changing them can cause anxiety. Some of your children might have a comorbidity of maybe something like autism, or something where routines are much more important because they feel safe within them. But just remember that it's a disordered brain means that you're going to have disordered behaviour as well. It worsens it. So check your own approaches. We want to solve problems. That's our job. I know we're tired. You know, the fridge is empty, we've got to go to the supermarket, got bags full of laundry to do and ironing and God knows what. We're all tired, but your children are developing, and part of our job is to support that as much as possible. And then of course they become these creatures, aren't they? What's going on here? This one. You think anger? I think this one's just got his GCSE, frankly. In fact, I did say to someone one time, what could go wrong here? And they said, you could put that in with your whites. The orange jumper. Anyway. And now sometimes the on-off switch is us. It's our reaction to a situation. It's us. We are the switch. But I also realised that inside an ADHD brain, they have got their own on-off switches, which are probably quite randomly coming on and off in different situations as they come. So we need to be able to react and respond to those in different ways, in a positive way, most definitely. But the beginning of it is that if you've got a good relationship, then you need to be able to explain that attitude, or the desire, the attitude towards wanting to make these changes is key. It's everyone pulling together. And I quite like this because the word attitude, you know, if you place them in the alphabet, it adds up to 100. Did you know that? That's a piece of useless information, I know. But I like that. I think that's a key point. And I was working with some students, 4 or 5 of them, and they'd been sent along to me when I was the behaviour lady. They were sent along to me. We talked about attitude. One of them said to me, oh yeah, my teacher says my attitude stinks. And I said, oh dear, well, we'll work on that. So I told him about this adding up to 100. And they went, all right, you know. And I thought, 5 minutes later, one of them said, Miss, I've been thinking about what you said about attitude. And I thought, oh, job done. You know, and he said, bullshit adds up to 102. I know. So I thought, well, he's done his numbers anyway. So like with all behaviour, we talk about the iceberg, don't we? Like all behaviour is driven by something, but we also, as humans, need to know what's in it for me to do this thing. So I quite like that expression. What's in it for me? If I do that, what will I get in return? That sounds, you know, a bit strict and a bit not very honest, but I think that at the bottom line, most people would like to have a reward of some kind. Now for us, it might be a warm feeling inside with a successful day. For others, they need something else. You know, we go to work because we're going to get paid. We do something because we feel good afterwards. There's a reward of some kind. Now, there's a tiny little bit of behavioural psychology, but Skinner, in 1938, he coined this term operant conditioning. And what we know about operant conditioning is that it's a way of being able to change behaviour by reinforcing the good stuff. So that's a reward. So you like what you're seeing, you get a reward for it, you're much more likely to do it again. Yes? When we train dogs, we give them a treat. When they've done something good, they're more likely to do it again. And I don't suggest that's what you do with your children, but I am saying that the behavioural psychology behind it can be manipulated to your benefit. So the big thing they did in his laboratory was around pigeons, and they're not known for their high intelligence. But what they managed to do with the pigeons was, in a cage, they had a little disc on the side of the cage, and the pigeon had to tap their beak on this disc. And it wasn't 1 or 5 taps or 10 taps, it just a random series of taps. Eventually food would come into the feeding tray. So the pigeon learned that by doing that they'd get a reward. And that whole basis of the psychology has been used in Vegas. You know, when people spend days putting their dollars into these slot machines, knowing that eventually some money will come out of the bottom. And that's why they don't move, because they haven't got money out yet. You know it's going to happen soon, because if I keep doing it, it will happen. So that is the basis of positive reinforcement. And I think that you'll often hear behaviour experts saying that you should ignore the negative behaviour and reward the positive behaviour. Well, my feeling about ignoring any behaviour is that it didn't ought to be ignored, but it shouldn't be the only thing you focus on, the stuff that's not going well. And as creatures, we do focus on what's not going well. So we need to try and flip that around, praise the positive reinforcement. I've got some verbal strategies, and they're like scripts that you can apply to your own scenarios around positive reinforcement. So there's this one. There's when and then. When we've stopped arguing, then we'll be able to sort it out. So that's what's in it for them. They want to sort it out. Hold the thought that your child wants to please you. You give them a chance to do that by saying how. So when we've stopped arguing, then we can sort this out. That's one. Got a few more here. When then. Oh, I love this one. When you've tidied everything away, then you can have half an hour on the laptop. Nice idea. Homework. That hot potato. When all your homework is finished properly, then you can have, and has to be a choice of their reward. So whatever you know they like, that's what they can have afterwards. It's a reward cube. So your child, if you've got more than one, they have to have a different one each. But I think that it's a really good idea to write all the things that they would consider a reward and write it onto this cube. Obviously you have to give it the thumbs up. And then when it comes to getting a reward, you can roll the cube, and whatever comes up, that's the reward that they will get. So it could be something really simple, like kick about in the park, or something where you will invest that back into your child. It could be a nice bowl of grapes. Who knows? Could be grapes that's the trigger that somebody needs. We've got here 2 minutes phone time, but that's a classroom one. Here's a reward cube. Choose a book to read. 4 minutes internet time. 4 whole minutes. Well, I don't think that will work, but you get the idea. So you will know what your child likes, and they can tell you, and you can write it on here. So then you've got a process whereby you can say, when you've done that, then you'll get this. And that's it. That's what's in it for them to do it. Give it a try. I mean, it's all worth a go, isn't it? There's another one here, and this is about choices. We need the homework finished. You can either start it now or at 6 o'clock. So now or later. When do you think they will start it? Okay. But you give them a choice, because if it's, I'm doing my homework, all right, well, you either got to do it now or at this time. So that's a choice. You choose. We need to get your room tidy. Got this one? You can either hang the clothes or make the bed. Your choice. My youngest daughter, when she used to tidy her room, she just used to pull all the drawers out, stuff everything in, and you go in. I took a photo one day, everything was just spilling out. And I sent it to my friend saying, this is a tidy room. She said, well, it's not on the bed, is it? It's not on the floor, it's in the drawer now. So that was the progress, I guess. We need this room to be quiet. So, if you have someone who gives you a running commentary in the sitting room when you're all trying to watch a film or something, we need this room to be quiet. Either keep the noise down or move to somewhere else. Thank you. So that's a very particular place. Don't say just leave the room. Say either stay here and keep the noise down, or go to your room, or go to wherever it might be. So that's another script you can try. Have you got anything so far that you're thinking, oh, I'm going to give that a try? Yeah, hope so. Now then, we talked, or Alistair did say, about the fact that you've got maybe people that won't comply. They just ignore you or refuse. And sometimes it's because you're making a demand. Most of the things I've suggested are choices or rewards. So if you do that, then we'll do this. You've got a choice between that and that. But this is really about making more subtle demands for people who are very oppositional. So you don't target the demand with them, you make it more general. So they would be direct demands. This is what you must do right now. But these are more subtle demands. Let's do this. We need to do that. We need to pop to the shops quickly. So rather than doing, your don'ts and your direct demands, do it as if everyone has to do it, and therefore we're part of the group. Start off like that. Older ones, older demands, I think it works almost as well. I think with older children, choices are better. They need to have the final say over their next course of action. So give choices rather than a one only, because if they say no, I'm not doing that, where do you go with that? Then you say, yeah, you must, I've told you to. And they say, well, I'm not going to. What are you going to do about that? So that's why you must give a choice of two things, either of which are fine with you. And then there's the third stage, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what I must say to you is that you have to stick to the fact that, these long-winded, as I said earlier, right and wrong conversations, it doesn't work. Say what you want, use problem-solving phrases. This is how we're going to get it right. Tell your child what they should be doing, and then say thank you, and remind them. Why do you have to remind? I mean,
there's always something that attracts their attention anyway.
Yes, and I think also if you're asking them to do a behaviour that's not comfortable for them as well, then they need to be coached and manipulated to do that, really. But let me just check out this behaviour thing. Could everyone just fold their arms for me? Well done, beat me to it. Just kidding. You knew I was going to say that. So, a simple instruction, agreed? Let's see how you got on then. That's right, wrong, right, right, wrong, wrong. So I gave you a simple instruction to fold your arms. I didn't tell you exactly how to fold your arms, and so many of you got it wrong, and all I did was highlight the wrongness of it. I didn't, when I said it's 50% wrong, or 70% wrong, or 100% wrong in some cases, the point is not that it is wrong, but in that circumstance I could have given you more information and you could have then got it right. So I said fold your arms, but what I really meant to say is fold your arms right over left. So can you fold your arms right over left for me? Thank you. That's right. All right, it's going very well so far.
If you're dyslexic, you've got a problem.
Well, this is what behaviour is like. You can't, it's difficult to change something that it feels uncomfortable or unnatural, or that someone doesn't show you how to do properly. We have a great expectation that everyone knows how to do the things we ask them to. Sometimes we need to be more specific and show them. So obviously there's no wrong way to fold your arms. I was giving you an example. Folding them the other way feels uncomfortable, doesn't it? It's a simple behaviour change. So if I saw you again and you came in and you sat down and you folded your arms, how would you do it? Come on, be honest. The way you've always done it, right? Unless I remind you, and then you might try, okay? And that's the message about reminding of behaviour. Don't assume that it will happen again the way you want it. Remind. And if you start saying, oh, I've told you that 5 times, I've told you that 10 times, I'm always having to, it doesn't matter. We all know that. We all have to remind and remind and repeat and remind. That's an anagram for parent, isn't it? We do have to do that. Stick to the facts, say what you want, problem solving, and remind. And this is a nod as good as a wink, is about saying, if I nodded to you, would you know what I meant? If I nodded to you, no. So if I gave you a withering look across the room, that's something I wanted you to change, would you know? You wouldn't know. So that's why you have to be specific, because we do that with our kids when we've got company in the room, don't we? And we think, oh, that's awful, you give them a look, you give them a shake of the head, and they go, what? So you have to be more specific. And if you've got lots of non-verbal strategies, if it's the phone, you want them to put the phone away, then show them that you want the phone away. If you want them to be quiet, have a little discussion about what that non-verbal message is. Keep on with your keeping ons, but do it non-verbally if you're doing it in mixed groups. Because if you tell someone off all the time, what happens? They do their switch off, or they start to create more behavioural scenarios. So, if at first you don't succeed, Your step 1 is your strategy. So whatever you're going to try today, that's step 1 of your behavioural approach. Your step 2 is a reminder. And you know why? Your step 3 is when you start to escalate it. So if it's important, you say what your sanctions are going to be. But I would prefer you give a choice right from the get-go, and you're unlikely to have to get to the sanctions part. You're much more likely to get compliance. But the reminder is an important step of your behavioural approach, okay? If at first you don't succeed, remind and then say what might happen if they don't. Do you have any sanctions at home? Removals? Yes? I don't know if I need to know that. So in summary, I would say to you, look at your language, look at your positive language, try and flip the things that you would normally say into a positive thing. Have a look at Emma Sutton's PACE poster when it's on the website. Don't focus on the negative. Remember what that pigeon did. He knew, that pigeon, that if he kept tapping away, a good thing will happen. So we've got to focus on the good stuff. We say that's good, that's good, that's good. There will be a reward for it. That's what's in it for you. Make sure you choose a couple of things that you're going to try. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.